to us. Happy birthday to us. Happy birthday to us, dear Spookaroos. Happy birthday to us. Yes, it's Eric D, and welcome to the Spooky Ass Shit anniversary show. Yeah, it's been a whole another year. I don't know, you guys probably care more about the episode numbers, but this is being recorded on February 17th, which is the night before the anniversary of the launch of the podcast, which was February 18th, 2016. So here we are, 4 years later, but 5 seasons now into the show, heading into our 5th season. Can you believe it? We've been together for 5 years. Now, I said last time that we talked, I would have a big announcement about the future of the show, and I would tell the Spookaroos on Facebook first because they're my true blue Spookaroos. And I did that. They know all about it. So if you're on the Facebook group, the Spookaroos, you already know. If you're not, sit tight. We're going to talk about it at the end of today's episode. And this episode is going to be a short one. Again, sometimes I find little things that I want to talk about, but I don't find a ton of information on it. So that is what's happening with this episode. And I could come up with some filler material for you, but I think I'd be doing a disservice to both you and myself. So why not just discuss what I have and then call it a day? I am alone again tonight, but the good news about that is that things are underway. I am booking guests for the future, and we will see in this coming year that there will be more guests, more excitement, bigger and better, aside from an announcement that I'm going to make later on at the end of the show. Stick around for that. But if you just want to talk about the subject tonight, which is going to be, it's not quite a local legend here in Massachusetts, but to the New England area, we are talking about a cryptid or cryptids known variously as wood devils, woods devils, and a bunch of other names we're going to get into in a little bit. But before we get into all of that, of course, I want to remind you to check out the show's webpage. That is spookyas.com or spookyasshit.com. There you can listen to each and every episode, even the ones no longer available on your favorite streaming services. And you can find links to all of our social media. We are at Spooky Ass Shit on both Twitter and Instagram. And you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/spookyas. And when you're there, you can also join our secret closed group, the Spookaroos. Those are the folks that like I said, I consider those my true blue fans, my ride or die fans. And that is where I drop all the biggest news first. So I know it's a little old-fashioned to use Facebook, but I like being able to see everybody's faces and all. So hence the Facebook. Although I've been making a push on Instagram. I actually put in a little effort, and I looked up some tips and tricks on how to grow your Instagram, and it's working a little bit. So it is a lot of work. And I don't know how long I'll keep that up. You know, I don't need to be Instagram famous, but I was a little sad when our numbers, you know, I see the numbers of downloads and it doesn't match the number of people on Instagram. Now, I know not everybody listening is going to run and join us on Instagram or Facebook or anything like that, but I thought a few more of you would. So if you are a fan of the show and you haven't done that yet, I highly encourage you to do so, and we can interact and have fun on the internet, because if you can't talk about spooky stuff on the internet, where can you talk about it? When last we talked, we were talking about the Salem Monster Hug event, charity event, that the Witchfinder, myself, and some of the other Salem buskers got together and performed this event for charity. Now, it was an outdoor event in the middle of February, so maybe that wasn't the brightest idea that we ever had. Maybe, you know, something in May or something would be better, but it was still fun. It was great to see everybody. Thank you to those of you who came out. In fact, someone came up to me and said, "Hey, I follow you on Instagram." So I guess it is working in a sense there. So good to know. Okay, nothing else to plug. Let's get into it. Let's talk about our wood devils. A lot of the info that I'm going to be talking about tonight comes from a website, bfro.net. And that is a website where they discuss Bigfoot sightings and stuff like that. Now, Bigfoot sightings, but I thought we were talking about wood devils. Well, we are. But is it all connected? We're about to find out. Wood devils are Bigfoot-like creatures, but there are some differences between the two types of creatures. Wood devils do stand about 7 feet tall, and they are known for their sleek, thin build. Now, this is one of the differences between a wood devil and a Bigfoot. When you think of a Bigfoot, you probably think of a big, muscular kind of creature. But these wood devils are said to be very sleek and thin. They are also said to be more gray in color instead of the Bigfoot traditionally being brown or black haired or furred, although not always, but traditionally. And they say that they actually look very human-like. They have kind of more human proportions than, say, a Bigfoot would, except that, of course, in the face, they don't look like humans at all. And their faces are very hard to describe because some people say they have kind of ape-like faces, and some people say they don't have any faces at all. As far as I can tell, and I can't swear that this is the truth, but as far as I can tell, the first reports of these wood devils actually came from lumberjacks. This was a little bit of lumberjack mythology, and I've learned that this is kind of a whole subcategory of its own. And I even learned of a delightfully titled book called Fearsome Critters, which is all based on lumberjack mythology, and I'm trying to track down a copy right now. And there are free versions available as PDFs online, so you can find this, and I will certainly be doing an episode about it in the future. There's all sorts of funky creatures listed in this book. But these wood devils are sort of listed and talked about. And basically the idea is that they are very ferocious, it says. Although they normally avoid contact with humans, if they do come in contact with humans, they can be very fearsome fighters. And they are known to take children who wander into the woods at night. So I think right away we can see where, just on the possibility that these creatures don't exist, we can kind of see where maybe this myth comes from, or at least what part the myth of the wood devils played in child rearing, which is a very common occurrence. We'll get to all those theories at the end of this episode, as we always do. Now, like I said, one of the key characteristics that separates perhaps a wood devil from a traditional Bigfoot, although they have a lot in common, is that they are supposed to be very sleek and slender creatures, and also, according to some reports, they have kind of a pointy head, but that's only some reports. So yes, this sleekness is their key feature, and what they use this sleekness for is to blend in with trees. It's said that they are so good at hide and seek that you are more likely to walk into a wood devil and not even know it before you are able to see one actually with your eyes, because they blend right in with the trees in the area. And they can do this by one of two ways. One, they can just stand there pretending to be a tree. And the other way is that they stand next to a tree, and then they kind of blend in that way. And if you do happen to get too close to one, what they like to do is they kind of scoot around to the other side of the tree opposite you so that you can't see them, and they're hidden by the tree. And again, their sleek figure is what helps them out with this. Now, I don't know about you folks, but I find that idea delightful. A cryptid that is just kind of creeping around a tree just so you won't see him. I said that these wood devils are a native cryptid of New England, and that's true, but to be more specific, they come from one particular county. Although there have been other sightings, the particular county they are said to come from is Coos County, which is in New Hampshire, up close to the Canadian border. Now, this is kind of a remote area of New Hampshire. I've not been there myself, but from what I've read online, and they say that, these tales of the wood devils come from tales that lumberjacks and old-timers used to tell back in the 1930s. And they say that, kind of before the Industrial Revolution, there was a lot more of these creatures around, and now there's only a few. But that may or may not be the case, because we have some more modern reports as well. When I was reading through some of these old-time reports, the reporter who was recording these had a quote that I found interesting. I'll share with you here. The quote is, quote, "I have never seen one, but the people who said they did were regular churchgoers and would strap their kids for lying." Now, I find that quote interesting because he says, yeah, it's not only this quote, but just in general, people will say, no, these were good God-fearing people. They wouldn't lie about this kind of thing. These were good church-going people. They wouldn't lie about this kind of thing. And I just have to point out that, these are people who believe in some form of deity in the sky, an invisible friend or enemy in the sky. So just put that in your mind when you're taking in their accounts. I'm just saying, I don't know why the fact that someone believes in the invisible being in the sky would make them more trustworthy, if you catch my drift. I know 10 Commandments, thou shalt not lie, and all that kind of thing, but I'm just saying, they're already prone to what you might call magical thinking. Listen, I ain't hating, I'm just stating. I mentioned that we had a couple more recent sightings, and so that's what we're going to talk about now. Sightings from this very century, going all the way back to the year 2000. A man named Evan Lichnowsky claims that he and his former wife, Edith, were walking along a nature trail, watching the sunrise, when a tall, dark, humanoid figure crossed over the trailhead in front of them. Evan says it took him a moment to comprehend what he had just seen, but he realized that it was a giant, fur-covered, barefoot beast. Perhaps, he thought, a Bigfoot. By the time he and his wife turned to ask each other, "Did you see that?" the creature had disappeared into the woods, as these kind of forest-dwelling creatures are known to do. Now, these stories that I'm relating now, they don't come exactly from Coos County, but they're from around the same area. And, reports of Bigfoot sightings here in New England are relatively rare. I think Maine probably gets a few more, but it's usually when you think of Bigfoot, you think of the Pacific Northwest, but a lot of Bigfoot hunters will tell you can find them in just about every part of the globe, or at least reports of what people claim to be Bigfoots. Now, Bigfoots, big feets, whatever the right term is. And of course here we're talking about wood devils. Now, this next story, we don't even get an eyewitness, we get an ear witness. I'm going to play some sounds for you, by the way, some sounds for comparison. And there's going to be a Bigfoot sound. This is not the actual sound from the story. This is just one that I am putting in as an approximation of what they describe the sound to be like. So when you hear that, please don't think you're hearing an actual Bigfoot call. This is just something I've created through my mastery of GarageBand. Okay, in 2014, a rancher named simply AJ in our story, he runs an elk and buffalo ranch just outside of the town of Errol, New Hampshire. Now, first of all, an elk and buffalo ranch, that sounds pretty cool, and I would like to visit this place. AJ reports that on one early autumn evening, just around dusk, he stepped out on his deck and heard a pack of coyotes making a lot of noise. Now, like I said, he stepped outside and he heard this noise, so he wanted to investigate. He was a hunter, so he was familiar with the sounds of forest animals in general, but as a rancher, he was especially familiar with the sounds of coyotes. Sometimes, a pack of coyotes would sneak into his property and kill one of his animals, and other times he would just witness them dragging their prey to a field just opposite a stream that kind of ran along his property, and he would see them making a meal of their prey. Standing on his deck that night, AJ couldn't see any coyotes, though he still heard them. He noted that they seemed extra loud and unusually agitated. Not long after stepping out, AJ claims that he heard, quote, a howl like I've never heard before. It was deep, and I heard this howl 3 times. My daughter, she heard it once. Right after that, the coyotes stopped, and I didn't hear a bark or a yip any more that night. End quote. Now, by the way, I've noticed something. When I do quotes on this show, I tend to slip into kind of a southern accent. I promise you that is not a reflection in any way on southerners. It's just a way to differentiate my voice, and I think I just kind of slide into it automatically. But don't take that as either a compliment or a knock if you happen to be a southerner. It's just a weird thing that happens in my voice. I guess I could just start talking like this. Maybe I'll try that next time. Anyway, AJ did not go out to investigate what was making the sounds that night, but he did get up early the next morning to go look for signs of what this howling creature could have been. Unfortunately, the ground was mostly frozen, so there were no tracks left behind for him to chase. So that's all the stories really that I have. Like I said, the legend is that they'll take children that wander into the woods, but I don't have any actual stories along those lines. So, our kind of New England Bigfoot tales, they don't tend to get as exciting as you might hear in other areas. But if you happen to know of a good New England Bigfoot story, please do let me know. But again, we may or may not be talking about Bigfoot in this case. In fact, let's get into some of the theories as to what these creatures may actually be. Now, of course, the first theory is that they are indeed some kind of Bigfoot, or perhaps a relative of Bigfoot. They are some kind of missing link between ape and man, something that got lost on the family tree somewhere. So it's possible that this is a cousin of Bigfoot, or perhaps this is just how Bigfoot's adapted to live in New England, to hide behind these trees and be sleek and slender. And this another creature in New England folklore, lumberjack folklore, that relates to this. And this comes from that book that I was talking about. I shouldn't say it comes from the book, but it's mentioned in the book that I was talking about, Fearsome Creatures. And this is a creature called the Hidebehind. The Hidebehind is so named because it hides behind a tree and strikes out at its prey. Again, in this case, normally young children. But the lumberjacks had a very interesting superstition around this. They said that these hideabout creatures, which were basically said to be the same things as what we call the wood devils here, these were big, furry creatures that would eat you if you got lost in the woods late at night, except the Hidebehind was said to hate the smell of alcohol, and it would not attack you if you had been drinking. So, we see the lumberjacks are coming up with creative excuses to why they must drink on the worksite, to keep the hideabouts away, of course. Now, the book that I mentioned, Fearsome Creatures, it is illustrated in a very amateur style, a very amateur yet charming style, and there is a picture of a hideabout hiding behind a tree, and it kind of looks like a cross between a giant sloth and a Scotty dog. And it is literally like clinging onto a tree, and it's about the same size as the tree, and it's just waiting to strike down at its next victim. So a lot of people are saying that these two creatures actually might be one and the same. It's not a form of Bigfoot, it's its own thing, but this is called the hideabout. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, this could just be a forest version of the boogeyman. The boogeyman will get you if you don't go to sleep. He'll get you if you don't behave well. It's the same here with parents basically using a story to scare the kids out of wandering into the forest, especially, back in the early 1900s and before, where kids didn't have their phones and all that kind of stuff that they have now. I don't think kids spend a lot of time in the forest anymore, do you, kids? I sound like an old man. But I actually did, when I was a kid, we did used to go for walks in the forest. We used to get into some activities out there. I guess kids probably still do that, right? You still go out there to drink and other things that you don't want your parents to know about. Hello once again to my nieces and nephews. Maybe you still do. But anyway, the idea here is that you wouldn't go out to the forest because these wood devils or perhaps a Hidebehind would come and get you if you did so. So this is just what we call a boogeyman. This is a story made up to scare children into behaving and make sure that they weren't tempted to go out into the woods. I think I've told on this show before, we didn't exactly have wood devils where I lived, but my older brother, Dan, who's been on the show, he certainly has come up with some stories a time or two. Of course, he told me when I was a kid there was a werewolf that would occasionally pass by my window. That turned out to not be true. And he also told me that there was a Russian living in an old abandoned shack in the wood. And we did grow up right next to the woods, and there was, in fact, an old abandoned-looking shack out there. And he told me that a Russian lived there, and if I was ever caught playing around it, then the Russian would shoot me on sight. I never did see a Russian, but I always pictured, if you're an old school wrestling fan, you'll know who I'm talking about. I just pictured Nikolai Volkov living in this cabin, and if he saw me, he would shoot me. Never happened, by the way, and I did, in fact, go into that cabin several times. Super brave. Anyway, more theories about this is that this wood devil is just a misidentification of an existing creature, most likely a bear, probably a black bear, something like that, something that's tall but not crazy tall. And a black bear, especially if you look at this picture, like I said in this book, Fearsome Creatures, I'll post a picture of it on the Instagram and on the Facebook group, but if you see this picture, it really does kind of look like this could just be a shaggy kind of black bear. It does look slightly different, but this is, an artist's interpretation. If it's something you see, first of all, bears in general, when they do stand upright, which is not their natural way, but of course they are known to for one reason or another, when they do stand upright, I think that people are sometimes, especially a black bear, fooled by how thin they actually are, because you think of a bear, you think of a big burly kind of thing, right? And grizzly bears certainly, but black bear, they can be kind of slender from what I've seen. I don't claim to be a forestry expert. I did live in the forest for a time, but not in a bear populated area, and I have not had any first-hand encounters with bears. I'm kind of glad to say I wouldn't mind seeing a bear under the right circumstances. Be kind of cool. But I did see, foxes and stuff like that, but no bears. So yeah, I think a lot of times these Bigfoot sightings and stuff like that, I do wonder if this is not a misidentification of a bear standing on hind legs. Of course, I'm definitely not the first person to propose that might be what people are seeing. Maybe not in every case, but in some cases, right? So that's one theory, but also, of course, the theory is that none of these are real. Not exactly a hoax in the fact that people are making up these stories completely, but for one reason or other, whether it is misidentification or perhaps it is actually a hoax and they're just trying to get people to believe in something a little mysterious for one reason or another, or they're trying to write a book or something like that. There are all kinds of reasons, just a little bit of attention, why people might make up a story like this about coming in to contact with some unknown or unusual creatures. We've seen it time and time again on this very show. That these stories get more and more out there as they go. So if the fame of the wood devils increases from this show or other paranormal cryptid type shows that talk about them, I wouldn't be surprised if we have not only more stories of wood devils, but we get more stories, more elaborate stories, and scarier stories about wood devils. That seems to be what happens. It happened with the black-eyed children. It's happening now with the shadow people. Now shadow people aren't just, these things you see in the corner of the room and that you only see when you're half asleep or, under sleep paralysis. Now they're things that you see at any time, and not only are they black, but they have red eyes that look down at you. And, that was a point that I made early on in this show's run in an episode that will be repeated soon. What's that I said? Yeah, repeated soon. We're going to talk about that in a minute. That tends to happen, it seems like. When these stories get out there, it becomes a game of yes and. And it's like, yeah, all those things happened when I saw a shadow person, and he had red eyes, and he tried to kill me, and he had a knife. And it's, it's like, wait, well, this isn't what a shadow person is, but now we've moved into this whole new thing. So this could be what happens if these creatures become a little bit more well-known, these wood devils. We might see some more intense stories. Right now, our stories are not very scary, as you might have noticed. You might think this episode was not particularly spooky, and you're right. But just you wait. If we make wood devils famous, we will get spookier wood devil stories. I'm just realizing as I'm recording this, I have said the title of the book that I have referenced incorrectly several times. The name of the book I was referencing is called Fearsome Critters, which is a way better title than Fearsome Creatures. Fearsome Creatures is fine, but that just sounds like what it is. Fearsome Critters, that sounds like some good old stories about these critters, which is exactly what this book is supposed to be. All right, now we're coming to the end of the show. So as I said, big announcement time. For those of you who followed me on Facebook, you already know this. But in case you don't, here is what is up. We are moving in, like I said, to the show's 5th season, 4 years, 5th season. And this is a lot of work to do each and every week. And I have to live my own life as well. And you may have noticed the schedule of release of the shows has been kind of up in the air. And there's been several weeks where there either wasn't a show, or there was a delay in the show, or the show came out late like it did this week. Is this one early or late? I don't know. That's a mystery for the universe to figure out. It's either a few days late or a few days early. But it's not like it used to be. I used to be able to get them out really consistently every Sunday, pretty much. And now it's kind of all over the place. And I'm realizing I might be just biting off a little bit more than I can chew at this time. So for the rest of this year anyway, this is going to become a bi-weekly podcast. So every other week there will be a new episode. However, I don't want to leave you guys completely in a lurch. You longtime listeners, well, this might not appeal to you, but if you're new to the show and you haven't heard the first 100-something episodes, which are no longer available on iTunes and some of the other podcast distributors, even though, of course, like I said, they are always available on the website. But the idea is that from now on, I will do a new episode, and then, in order, I will play an old episode. There might be 1 or 2 episodes, by the way, that I choose not to replay again because I don't like them, or maybe I'll re-edit them or something like that. There's going to be differences. I do plan to record some intros to some of these episodes to kind of talk about, something that happened related to each episode before or after or during recording, little anecdote stories like that, or maybe an update. But like I said, for the most part, I'm going to be playing these in order, and every other week will be a new episode, and then it will be a repeat episode with perhaps a new intro or outro to the episode. This way, I get a little bit of time to breathe, and yet the show isn't taking any time off. I mean, there still might be the odd week or two where there is no show. Who knows? Life is funny, and we never know what tomorrow will bring. This is not something that I make money at, and it's just a kind of a fun thing that I do, kind of a passion project of mine, and I'm just really grateful that you guys are along for the ride, but there's no money involved here. I am thinking about starting a Patreon page, but I have some reservations about that. You can hit me up with questions if you have questions about that on Facebook or through the email, spookyassshit@gmail.com. That's ASS. So that's the deal. That's what's going to happen. It's going to become an every other week podcast with repeats in between. Now, I know in podcasting, you don't really need to do repeats for the most part, but now that iTunes has set a limit on the number of episodes that they'll allow to be out at one time, it kind of does make a little bit of sense. And that way, if you're a new listener, you get exposed to the earlier stuff too. And it just keeps, hopefully the download numbers will be a little bit more consistent, even though I'm not doing a new episode each and every week. Now, I can't promise that this will last forever, and I can't promise that it won't last forever. We're going to wait and see. We're going to see what this year brings. Maybe there'll be some glorious victories to be had, and things will change for better. Or who knows? This could be the final year and we wrap it all up here in year number 5. But I don't want to make this sound like it's a bummer announcement. I hope that everybody understands that, we gotta deal with our own lives sometimes, and that's what's going to happen for me now. But of course, I'll still be bringing you new episodes every other week. So, just a little bit of breathing room for me, that's all. And the good news is I think that this will allow the show to get back to where it was. I feel like it's been a little bit lackluster lately, to be honest with you. Not every episode, but some of the episodes. I get excited about every topic that I bring up on the show, but I don't feel like I always get to give each episode the time and attention it deserves, especially where because of some things going on in my personal life, nothing major, nothing to be concerned about, but some things going on. I haven't had as many guests in the past year as I normally do, which to me is what makes the show fun, is being able to have guests on and people come over and take part in the podcast. To me, that's the fun part. That's the part that I really enjoy about it, aside from talking with you guys. So I want to get more into that, and scheduling people and getting people here. All that stuff takes time. So dealing with that and coming up with the show and recording it on my own, editing it on my own, researching it on my own, it takes up a lot of time. So I think this 2-week barrier will be a good thing in the long run, and you'll get better quality shows out of it. That's my hope. But as time goes on, I'd love to hear your feedback. So there's the email again, spookyassshit@gmail.com. And of course, you can always hit me up on Instagram. We are at spookyassshit, or on Facebook, facebook.com/spookyass. And you can join the Spookaroos if you really want to have a deep dive conversation with me and the other true blue Spookaroos. So again, things you can do for the show. Listen, it's the show's birthday. How about a present? No, I'm not talking about a financial present or a physical present. How about you just leave a nice review on iTunes or wherever you happen to be listening from? Trust me, I know there's about 1 million podcasts out there, and the fact that you found this little show and that you have been listening and enjoying, hopefully, this whole time, or however long you have been, that is awesome, and it means the world to me, and I would just like to hear from you. So go ahead, leave those 5-star reviews, leave those kind words of encouragement, keep this show going strong, and until next time, don't be afraid.